12 years, Cross the Nations have been travelling the globe, carrying a cross and a message of love and hope. They've seen God do the impossible and change the lives of countless people. People think that miracles are just a work of fiction, but it's time now for people to hear the truth. It's time for people to hear the story of Cross the Nations.
So the mission was Poland. This was Alan's first proper crosswalk with me. We were going to be walking from Warsaw to Hernhut over the border into Germany. About just over 600 kilometers, the whole journey. And I remember it was freezing cold. It was -3. It was like 6 inches of snow in Warsaw before we left. And so we got straight onto the dual carriageway, takes us out through the middle of the city, out to the outskirts. And it was really dangerous. I remember it being really dangerous. It was hard to know, really, because normally we'd walk on the white line, right on the
Couldn't see it.
Side of the road. And it was almost impossible to know where you were with the snow and everything else. And truck drivers didn't look particularly that happy with us as we was walking on that busy road. We got to the outskirts of the city, and we walked through quite a built-up area, flats, and then some individual housing. And when we got a bit nearer coming out of the city, I noticed that there was a group of people stood around in a driveway leading up to a bit of a workshop. And so I waved, and they waved back. So I went straight over to them. And I quickly realized they couldn't speak English. So I was trying to communicate with them, and they sort of put their hand up to say, 1 minute, 1 minute. They called for their son, university student, who could speak perfect English. And so through their son interpreting for me, I preached the gospel to all of the family and all of the workers standing there. And so this young lad was interpreting for me. And after a little bit, it became obvious that he was being affected himself by what I was saying. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but we ended up just talking on our own. And it was quite amazing, actually, because he was really seeking, really interested in the message about Jesus. And right there on the driveway, after about chatting for 15, 20 minutes, he asked Christ to come into his life and forgive him and become a saviour. And so that was the first bit of fruit, really. So we got back on the road. Alan and myself were walking on the white line, as we always do. And I remember there was a particular truck driver, and he was coming towards us. I could see from quite a distance that he was staring at us, and he looked really angry. And you know, his eyes were like popping out of his head. He looked like he was growling at us, you know. Alan never saw any of this, but he deliberately turned his wheel and come right over our side of the road. And if we hadn't have got out of the way, the mirror of his truck would have hit us in the face, could have killed us. So when he got almost right over our side, I remember just kind of like nudging, pushing Alan to the side, and we ended up falling on the floor together. Laughing, really, because it was just a crazy situation. But it is really dangerous walking especially on main roads, lots of trucks going past. Some of them are overtaking each other on the mobile phone, and just not, it is incredibly dangerous, what we do.
After we went to Poland, I really knew that this was something that God was calling me to. And so I decided to walk from Manchester back to London because I felt, first of all, it would be good to see if God would be with me in the same way, if the experience would be the same. And there was that sense of a kind of an Elijah and an Elisha thing where, Elisha throws down Elijah's cloak and says, "Where now is the God of Elijah?" And I guess there was a sense of, is God going to be with me in the same way, or was he just with Mike? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I did a solo walk, Manchester to London, and it was during the second week. I'd spent the night in Loughborough, and I was on my way to Leicester, going down the A6 dual carriageway again. It wasn't quite as dangerous as Poland. There was quite a big gap the other side of the white line, so I felt fairly safe and secure. Sometimes when you're walking on these roads, you think, am I allowed to walk on it or not? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You don't know what the laws are or whatever, but I was allowed to walk on it. And I'd probably been walking maybe an hour, and I was walking along, and I could see there was like a lay-by up ahead, a pulling a bit on the hard shoulder. And as I approached it, a truck passed me and pulled in to this lay-by. Anyway, as I'm approaching, walking with the cross, I thought, someone wants to talk to me or whatever. It often happens, people stop in all sorts of places wanting to talk to you on the road. Anyway, a guy jumps out of the cab, walks towards me, but he doesn't look happy at all. He's shouting. Wow. And he says, "Why are you following me?" Except for there's a few other swear words in there as well. And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "Why are you following me?" And I said, "I'm not following you, mate." Do you know what I mean? Excuse me. I said, "I'm not following you." He said, "Yes, you are. You're flipping following me." I said, "I don't understand. What are you on about?" He said, "Were you in Poland 6 months ago with another fella with a cross?" And I said, yeah, I was. He said, "Well, I saw you there. I tried to run you off the road." I went, amazing. "Oh," I said, "I remember that. I do remember that." I said to him, "So what's the deal? Why are you so angry? Why are you trying to kill me?" And so he began to tell his story. And I'm going to cut a really long story reasonably short, but he was living with his girlfriend, and his sister, this guy, his name's Yaroslav, his sister was a believer, and she'd been praying for him, and she would invite them to come to church and stuff like that, and he was never interested or whatever, and they never bothered. And then one Sunday, apparently, she invited them, and his girlfriend said, "Oh, I'll come." So she went to church with his sister. Anyway, she went to the service, and she comes back, and she's only gone and given her life to Jesus. Anyway, it didn't really make any difference to him. He wasn't interested. But what happened was, after a few days, I don't think it was 2 or 3 days, a couple of weeks or whatever, she kind of sat him down on the sofa and had a bit of a heart-to-heart with him and said, "Look, Yaroslav, I'm a Christian now. I've given my life to Jesus. We can't continue to live in this way. I want you to come to church. I want you to give your life to Jesus. And I think we should get married as soon as possible." And he was like, "Well, why can't we just stay as we are? It was all fine before. I'm happy as we are. Let's just stay like that." And she was quite insistent. She said, no, we have to do this right. And he was like, he just didn't want to do that. Anyway, she said, look, if you're not prepared to do this, I'm going to move out. So I don't think he took her seriously. And after a few more days, maybe another week or so, nothing changed. He didn't change his mind. So she moved out and he was gutted. So he said to me, look, God has got involved and he's just ruined my whole life. I was happy until God got involved. Yeah. And so he was really furious. So he'd been like, he was quite aggressive, but he hadn't punched me or anything, but he had pushed me in the chest a few times. So he'd been quite forceful with me, but he's an emotional man. So I felt I had the liberty to be quite forceful back with him. So I said to him, look, it seems to me God hasn't ruined your life at all. It's just you've reacted in the wrong way. I said, first of all, it sounds to me like you've got a great family. Your sister's been praying for you, which is great. I said, and your girlfriend sounds like a real woman of integrity. She sounds like a fantastic woman. You're a mug not to marry her. And I said, and secondly, I said, God's clearly sending messengers into your life that you should see us in Poland, at that time. And it stirs such strong emotions in you, this reaction to the cross, this reaction to Jesus, that, God's clearly touching a nerve in your life. And I said, and finally, I said, what are the odds? What are the chances that God sends exactly the same person and you meet them on the other side of Europe, like thousands of miles away?
Yeah.
And, it prompts you to stop and say, what's going on? I said, God's on your case. I said, Jesus died on the cross for your sin. He gave his life for your life so that you could have eternal life. He rose again from the dead so that you could be forgiven and enjoy eternal life and have a relationship with him. I said, it's clear to me God's on your case.
Yeah.
And so he looks at me and he says, well, you're making it sound like I don't have any choice. And I said, I don't think you do. So he went quiet and he was like looking a bit thoughtful. And he said, all right then. I said, well, what do you mean all right then? And he said, I'll do it. I said, do what? He said, I'll give my life to Jesus if that's what it takes. I said, okay. So I prayed with him that Jesus would reveal himself to him. And then he prayed. Now, of course, he's Polish. He prayed in Polish. I don't know what he said. And we come away and I pray for him again. And I have to be honest, he didn't look that enthusiastic. Do you know what I mean? He was like a reluctant thing. I hadn't forced him, but he looked like he felt like he'd been forced a bit. So anyway, I give him a tract. He gets in the truck and he drives off. And I think, I didn't get a photo, didn't take contact details, nothing. Do you know what I mean? Because it caught me completely off guard. And I thought, oh man, what's going to happen? But anyway, I get picked up by this couple in Leicester and I stay with them and I tell them the story and what have you. And I'll be honest with you, then you kind of move on because then other exciting things happen along the road and what have you. Anyway, get back from the crosswalk. I don't know, it may be 3 weeks later, something like that. He contacts me because he's got my contact details on the tract. And he says, do you remember me? It's Yaroslav. And I said, yeah, of course I remember you. He said, I've started to go to church. So I was really, really thrilled. And I didn't hear much from him, but just occasionally he would keep in touch, like I would reply to him. And 15 months later, to be honest, it was around Christmas time, he messaged me and I saw some pictures. He married the girl, this girl called Eva. They got engaged, they got married, and they put it all on a right footing. And God kind of sorted the whole thing out. I mean, it's an amazing story, really.
Isn't it? I mean, so, like, this fella tries to essentially, all right, I don't want to use the word kill you, but not far off, tries to run you both off the road. and then however many months down the line, you just happen to be in the right place at the right time. It's like, how does that happen?
Go on, tell him, Alan.
But here's the thing, right? We don't really fully understand the way that God works circumstances behind the scenes. But the thing is, when I was doing that trip, I'd walked from Derby to Loughborough the day before. It was 18 miles. I was really, really tired. And I was staying with this young fella who was a school teacher. He had a little terraced house. And I couldn't get the cross in through the door. Do you know what I mean? It was like you open the door and you're straight in the lounge. So I had to dismantle the cross and take it apart before I could get in. And I was tired and I couldn't be fussed. I didn't put it all in the bag and all the rest of it and pack it up. He said, no, just leave it in the lounge on the floor. That'll be fine. So I did. And I went in and I had a shower. It's always the first thing I do when I get, like I want my shower. Do you know what I mean? I had a shower. Had a bite to eat, spoke to the fella for about 20 minutes, went to bed, and get up the next morning and have some breakfast. And then I come in to put the cross together. This is like, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock, something like that. Anyway, I've got my tools out, I've got the bolts, and I'm looking around thinking, where's the plates? Because there's two plates, steel plates, with 4 holes in that we put each side to hold the 2 main lengths of the cross together. And I'm looking around and I can't find them. And like I'm scratching my head and I'm looking and I can't find them in the lounge. And I'm thinking, are they in my rucksack? What have I done with them? Anyway, I can't find them. And the realization then comes to me that when I was dismantling the cross the night before, I'd left the plates on top of his bin outside, took them off. I thought, you know what it is, you think I put them somewhere safe and I just stuck them on the bin. And of course, when I took everything in, I'd left them on the bin. And so I'll go straight outside. Of course, they're not there. But somebody's come along, look, they've seen them and thought, oh, they'll come in handy. Do you know what I mean? I'll have them and add them away. So I'm in Loughborough. So I've got to make that phone call to Mike, haven't I? And it's like, Mike, I'm a bit of an idiot. Do you know what I mean? So I ring him up and say, Mike, I've lost the plates of the cross. Do you know what I mean? And fair play to Mike. Fair play to him. He wasn't angry at all. He said, well, do you know what? I was thinking I would come down and visit you on the walk anyway. He said, Bethany's got an inset day. I'll bring her down and I'll bring some plates down because he had another set of plates. And so I had to wait at this fella's house till Mike got there, basically. So Mike rocks up. In fairness, I don't know how long it takes to drive from Weaverham to Loughborough, but it didn't seem like it was that long. Anyway, he rocks up. Apparently in the car, Bethany says to Mike, he's still learning, isn't he, Dad? She's only about 10 years old, and it's like I felt completely mocked. So anyway, Mike turns up, we put the cross up, we walk along, and as is Mike's habit, he likes to take somebody out for a bit of spot of lunch. He treated me to a spot of lunch. We had like a burger in this little restaurant place and something to drink. And then he kind of waved me off. So, yeah, we're talking now, it's probably 12:30, 1 o'clock. So I'm like 4 hours behind schedule, got to be, at least that. And then obviously I'm off on the road. I can remember a lorry driver stopping in town, blocking all the traffic, talking to me, and they're beeping. He says, oh, don't mind them, and we're chatting away. So I'm way, way behind schedule. But if I wasn't behind schedule, I would have missed this Polish guy. Yeah. So, you know, God was working in the circumstances through my weakness, through my mistakes, to bring this bloke to salvation.
That was one of the reasons that I really wanted people to hear these stories and to hear you guys talking about this sort of stuff, because I watch TV. I love watching TV shows and stuff like anyone else, and maybe too much at times. but I love watching like sort of sci-fi ones. But there's these shows where just works of fiction where it depicts people having amazing coincidences and all these things being connected in a certain way. And like I was watching these shows and just thinking, I know two fellas that are out there actually seeing this stuff happen. That's real life. Like, the amount of times that you've probably had things happen where you were just in the right place at the right time, maybe accidentally or on purpose. But it's just the way that God works everything together is incredible.
Thinking about the whole right time, right place, Graham, and Alan and I walked from Zagreb to Osijek. I think just before we got to Osijek, Alan got a phone call from home saying that his wife was unwell, and it was serious enough for him to have to go home straight away. Now, we had another few days walk ahead of us, so I said to Alan, okay, well, I'll just do the last part on my own, a few more days. So Alan went home, and the next day, or the same day Alan travelled to the airport, I did the next day's walk on my own. So I'm carrying tracks that we're both carrying. Thanks for that, Alan. So I think I came to a little town called Vincevac, and there was a bar there, and I needed to use the toilet, and I thought, right, this looks a good place. So I put the cross outside this little cafe bar. Now, cafe bars in Eastern Europe, like in Croatia, cafe bar doesn't sell food. It's just coffee and alcohol. So I thought, well, this will be okay. I'll have a coffee and then I'll have a rest. So I went up some stairs into the bar, and I walked up to the bar, and there was a young lady there. And she kind of, when she looked at me, she sort of did a double take. And I thought, it's a bit strange. So I ordered a coffee. And while she's making the coffee, she keeps looking at me. And I'm thinking, have you not seen a handsome fella before? Obviously, that weren't the reason. So she keeps staring at me. And eventually, I said to her, "Are you okay? You're all right. You look like you've seen a ghost." And then she told me. She said, "Last night I had a dream." She said, "And in this dream, I was standing here, as I always do every day, in this bar, thinking about my life and wishing that something would change, wishing that something would happen that would bring meaning to my life." She said, and as I was thinking that, she said, this man came in, and she said, this man looked exactly like you. And he started to tell me things about my life that you could never know. And she said, I woke up in the morning knowing that I'd seen an angel, and I had hope in my life that I'd never had before.
Wow.
And as soon as she told me this story, it was like God turned the tap on in my mind, in my brain. And I, all of a sudden, had a download of things about her life that I knew. I suddenly knew stuff about her. And I started to talk about her life, and she started to break down and cry. And at that actual moment, a group of lads came in, and they were rowdy, and they were laughing, and they were flirting with this young lady. And it kind of broke up the moment, kind of ruined the moment. And I'm like thinking, no. But I waited, and it didn't look like it was going to come to an end. So I kind of boldly sort of broke in and said to the girl, can we just go over there and have 5 minutes together? Quick 5 minutes, and then I'll jump back on the road. I've got to go. But I need to talk to you. She said, yes, of course. So we went over to some soft seats, sat down together. I carried on talking about how that God had sent me, and it was more about God pursuing her than anything about me.
Yeah.
I started to continue the conversation, and it felt like God, the Holy Spirit continued, the flow continued, and she wept as I was talking to her. And I asked her, I said, do you want to connect up with God? Do you want to give your life to Jesus? Do you want to open your heart right now? She said, I want to open my heart with all of my heart.
Oh,
Right
bless her.
there, she just gave her life to Christ,
Wow.
to Jesus. So I was thinking about that. She saw me in her dream.
Yeah.
Interesting. She saw just me.
Yeah.
Alan, just me. Alan had gone home the same day.
And she wasn't a Christian. She wasn't
No.
church boy.
A lot of people in Eastern Europe, they're Orthodox, or they've been brought up in a religious context, but there's no concept of a relationship with God, knowing God, or anything like that. So that was an amazing experience for me.
I hope that you've enjoyed watching Cross the Nations, the series, and hopefully it's inspiring you and showing you that God still works today. If you've got a story about how Cross the Nations has touched your life, or maybe you've met Alan and Mike along the way, please email us and let us know at hello@crossthenations.com. It'd be great to hear what God's done in your life, and tune in next time for another episode of Cross the Nations, the series.